Hello everyone. We are very excited to have you in attendance today. Thank you very much for joining us on this webinar and educating yourselves on the important subjects that we are going to cover. Now before we get to the presentation, I do want to take care of a few housekeeping items. When you registered for the webinar, a packet of information was sent to you to the email that you registered with. In this packet of information is additional information on the speakers, some more resources, and some relevant content. So please feel free to go through that packet. At the conclusion of the presentation, there will be a Q&A session for about 5 to 10 minutes. Please take advantage of this Q&A session as it might be the most valuable time you get with a top lawyer. Now, due to limited time, we might not be able to address all the questions that you may all have. You will have the chance to email us or schedule a call to address your specific question at the end of the webinar. Also, at the conclusion of the presentation, you will be sent a survey link to your email. Now, it is especially important for us that you fill out this survey because we want to make sure that the knowledge and information we're providing to you is both relevant and what you're looking for. If you do want to ask additional questions or discuss your personal situation, you will also have the ability to schedule a call in that survey link in the email. Now, during this presentation, we are going to be discussing a few main topics. The first is estate planning. So whether you have your estate planning done or it's on your list of things to do, we'll be discussing important legal documents such as wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and how they can help your family. Now, after reviewing many estate plans, one of the common things that we see is that a lot has changed since the original plan was created. These could be personal changes, they could be legal changes, or maybe both. Another thing we commonly see is that some people miss out on one of the most important steps of estate planning, which is actually funding the trust. So we're going to provide that information for you. You can take the information yourself and then decide whether your current estate plan is meeting your current needs. Now, estate planning is great to have in place and is also extremely critical to have in place in the case of emergency. However, if not created a certain way, it might not give the most protection if someone goes into a long-term care situation. Now, once you turn 65, the chances of you needing long-term care in some capacity greatly increases. Home care, assisted living, nursing home, all of these come with many different choices, and a lot of families don't know all those choices, nor do they know the answers to the questions that are sparked by all those different choices and options. There's also a lot of cost that comes to this care. So when you're thinking about these things, there should be some questions you want to ask yourself. What kind of care do you prefer? Who's going to pay for the care? How are they going to pay for the care? And who's going to help in the facilitation and coordination of all these efforts? So our two speakers are going to talk about both financial and legal strategies that hopefully will help answer some of those questions and also make you consider some things when discussing protecting your assets from long-term care expenses. So, without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Attorney Don Rosenberg. Don Rosenberg has more than 30 years of experience in practicing law and focuses on estate planning, elder law, Medicaid planning, veterans benefits, end-of-life care, special needs planning, and other specialties. He has been recognized by the New York Times as one of the top attorneys in the state of Michigan. Don is also the former chair of the Elder Law and Disability Rights section of the State Bar of Michigan, former chairman of the board of directors on the Alzheimer's Association, Greater Michigan chapter, and is accredited by the U.S. Department of Veterans. His numerous years of experience have gained him a wealth of knowledge in elder care planning, practice of law, and is one of our premier professional partners. So, with your help, please help me welcoming Don Rosenberg.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Welcome to Becoming Elder Wise, Going Gray. It's not all black and white. We're going to go into the area of life planning and elder law, and I'm warning you right now, it's a complicated area of the law and it changes constantly. So today your takeaways are, I want you to understand your problems without planning. I need to educate each and every one of you and your loved ones what they need to know, whether it's a durable power of attorney, Lady Bird deed, Medicaid, and more. Would love to answer your questions regarding your concerns. Dispel the myth that it's never too late to plan, even if there's a diagnosis of incapacity or dementia. You need to understand the difference between estate planning and elder law, and we would love to be the inspiration to you and your family and your clients. So it starts with planning. You have to ask yourself, have you done everything you should to ensure that you and your loved ones will be taken care of in the event of your disability or when you're no longer here to take care of them? And frankly, one of my favorite sayings in life, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. We have to plan today. We have to plan ahead. We can't procrastinate. And frankly, these are uncertain times, and I'm going to state the obvious. This is our wake-up call. What's going on in this world? It's now more than ever. It is more important to plan now than it ever has before. I can't begin to tell you how many stories I have heard in regards to this virus and how many clients and families have dealt with these issues. Nursing homes are locked up. People can't visit people. And the bottom line is families need authority to take care of each other. And this is life planning for today and the next 25 years. I think we've all understood that no one's promised tomorrow. And elder law attorneys, we plan for the unthinkable. We think outside the box. So one of the statistics are 70% of all caregivers over the age of 70 go first. Bet you didn't think about that. Just think about the caregiver taking care of the person that needs care. It's difficult, it's stressful, it's emotional, and it's financial, and 70% of all caregivers over the age of 70 go first. So everybody in this audience probably has, if they have a plan, I typically know what it is. I'm kind of like a savant. I know that if you're married, you have a plan that says if something happens to me, it goes to my spouse. If something happens to my spouse, it goes to my surviving spouse. So husband and wife go to each other. And then where's it go? It goes to the kids. Well, if there's a caregiver taking care of an ill spouse, and the well spouse goes first, all the assets are going to go into the ill spouse's name. That ill spouse perhaps cannot live at home anymore or independent, and they take the assets with them right to the assisted living or nursing home or whatever. And they've missed this huge opportunity to take advantage of planning. What we do when we plan outside of the box, we create documents that allow us to deal with these issues. For instance, our durable power of attorney will have the ability to amend a trust. So Mary and Bill came to me years ago. Bill ended up with Alzheimer's. Mary was the well spouse. They came to me when Bill was diagnosed. We changed the trust so that in the event that, and Bill wasn't competent at that time, Mary had the ability to change the documents. So if she went first, the asset stayed in the trust. The kids had managed it. It wasn't an available asset for Bill. Bill went into a nursing home. Everything was protected, and we were able to take care of Bill. Bill got belligerent, and we needed a sitter 8 hours a day in the evening. It cost them $20 an hour. They had the money to do that, and his care was paid for by Medicaid. So as an elder law attorney, we have a mission. And this first mission is, I want to control my property while I'm alive, take care of my loved ones if I become disabled, be taken care of if I become disabled, and give what I have to whom I want, the way I want, and when I can, and if I can, I want to save every last tax dollar, professional fee, and court cost possible. That's what an estate planning attorney can accomplish. What can an elder law attorney add to this? Further, if I ever have to go to a nursing home, which I never ever want to do so, I want the greatest quality of care in the least restrictive setting, at least costing me and my family. This is not about saving the kids' inheritance. This is about making sure you guys get the best quality of care. And if you do the planning correctly, you will leave a legacy to your family. And of course, if we start planning, you know, money bags lead to punching bags. We have to start dealing with family dynamics. And frankly, we see, you know, this is not a game show, but many, many times this is Family Feud. Our firm is basically 9 attorneys. There's 5 attorneys that all they do is when the family can't get along, money, jealousy, control, whether it's wills and trusts and guardianship and conservatorships, and it's probate. And they're all fighting in court. There's 4 of us that all we do is we try to make peace. We try to plan ahead. We try to put our house in order, get our ducks in a row before proactively. So what is the difference in elder law? So everyone thinks elder law. I'm not old. I'm not in their 80s. I don't need elder law. Actually, it's for anybody who wants to be old one day. An estate planning attorney will look at the estate tax laws. State tax laws today are not going to be of much significance because the exemption amount for a married couple is about $22 million. They look at power of attorneys and they basically say, your power of attorney will be effective the moment you become incapacitated. When we look at a power of attorney for health care, day-to-day medical care, I want it effective immediately. And I'll tell you a story about my mother in a few minutes to illustrate how important that is. Most power of attorneys limit the ability to prohibit gifts. Well, gifting is not just to your kids. It may be a transfer to the husband and the wife. Transferring and protecting assets. And that may be a major way to protect assets by doing a sole benefit trust, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. There's no long-term care language to protect your homes. If your home is in a trust, the bottom line is it's not protected from the nursing home anymore. And if you have a child with a disability, everybody understands you can't leave money, but so they disinherit them instead of doing a special needs trust. We look at the Medicaid laws, the estate tax laws. We want the power of attorney effective immediately for medical decisions. We want the power of attorneys allowing proper gifting. And we want the house to be moved from the trust if it's in there. Or better yet, we want to make sure we do it the right way, called the Lady Bird deed. And we answer questions. What if I can't stay in my home? How can I pay for it without going broke? And I want the greatest quality of care at the least cost to me and my family. If you don't plan, here's what happens. If you can't pay your bills and there's nobody has the authority to make your decisions, you need to go into court because you need a conservatorship because you can't manage your property affairs effectively and your property is going to be wasted or dissipated. If you can't make your personal, medical, day-to-day, end-of-life, mental health decisions, you need a guardian. Husband and wives don't have the authority to make each other's medical decisions. Parents and children over 18 don't have the authority to make each other's medical decisions. Either you have a court order or we do what's called a power of attorney. So if you become disabled, unable to make your own financial medical decisions, you have a choice. You can let the court supervise your affairs and lose control and there's no limit to the cost. Or you maintain control. Do something in documents. Put your wishes in writing. Create that elder law power of attorney and a durable power of attorney for health care. And you keep control. And it's at little cost and less impact to the family. And all power of attorneys are not the same. Let me tell you a couple stories. So this is a story about my father-in-law. My father-in-law, when he was 88, he was a very religious man. He used to go to his house of worship and he would do it 365 days a year, go in the morning, go at night, and there was no issues. He was living alone, independently. One day we got a call from his clergy saying, you know, Marty's been sitting in the parking lot at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 2, sometimes 1 a.m., waiting, and the custodian's telling us that he's sitting there waiting for services to start. I think you guys have a problem. So I think we had a problem. So we talked to him and he said he was getting nervous. He was going to miss services. So when he got up in the middle of the night, he just got dressed and went and wait in the parking lot. So we decided the family would put a plan together. We would call him and tell him when to get up. Well, it worked for a little bit, and then the phone call started. Is it time to get up yet? Is it time to get up yet? Is it time to get up yet? This went on for about a month. I said to my wife, there's no way we can continue this. I'm walking around like a zombie. I can't get into work and I can't function. I said, I have his power of attorney for health care with you. We can act independently, and if you don't deal with this, I'm going to deal with it. At the time, I was president and chairman of the board of the Alzheimer's Association. I knew all the proper doctors. I went to a doctor at Henry Ford. I talked to her, and she looked at me and said, we need to do a sleep study. And I looked at her and I thought she was crazy. We ended up doing the sleep study and found out he had the worst case of sleep apnea known to man, so to speak. So we got a caregiver to deal with him in a CPAP machine. We got our dad back. It was a diagnosis of not Alzheimer's. It was Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's. This was the first time in May of 2012 that they linked dementia and sleep deprivation. This was the national news story. It was on the Free Press. It was in Tokyo newspapers. And this was the headlines. This is my father-in-law, Marty Rosenfeld, my wife, Shelley, and my sister-in-law, Cookie. He passed away at 91 from the Lewy body dementia, but we got him back for 3 years because I stepped in and had a health care power of attorney that was effective immediately. He was still competent, and we were able to protect and preserve and provide for him. One more story. My parents, my mom died at 98. My dad was the caregiver, and he died at 94. See, the caregiver went first. My mom was then living alone, and she passed away at 98. When they were 91, my parents were living in a semi-independent living, and I got the phone call from my dad that said, "Mom can't get up." I go, "What do you mean Mom can't get up?" To make a long story short, they rushed her to the hospital. I went to the hospital. I saw my dad. My mom was gone, and they were doing all types of tests. The doctor comes in and says to me, "Who are you?" I explained who I am. He wheels my mom back from all the tests, whether it was a CAT scan and blood work and all that type of stuff. She was so debilitated, she couldn't walk, she couldn't stand. And the doctor says, "Well, we can't find anything wrong, and you're going to have to take her home." And I said to him, I said, "Well, I'm her son. I have her power of attorney." And I handed him the power of attorney, and he says, "Well, these don't become effective until she's incapable of making her own decisions." My mom's laying in the bed saying, "I want to go home, I want to go home." She's competent and saying, "Why am I here?" and all that type of stuff. And it's the first time in my life I told my mom politely to be quiet and asked her if I can make the decisions. I said to the doctor, "This power of attorney is effective immediately. She's allowing me to make the decisions. We're not going to be able to take her home." He grabs the document out of my hand. He walks out of the room and says, "I'll be the judge of that." He comes back 15 minutes later and says, "This is wonderful. All parents and families should have a document that allows for day-to-day medical care effective immediately because you can be a partner in each other's care. You don't have to wait till somebody is declared disabled, provided that person allows you to be involved in the care and acquiesces in it." He says, "This is great." He says, "You can make your mom's decisions, but the bottom line is you got to take your mom home." I said, "We can't find anything wrong." And I said, "I'm not taking her home." And he says, he says, "You know what we're going to do?" He says, "Yeah, we're going to call Adult Protective Services." He goes, "Yes, we are." I said, "Would you like the number?" So we're going back and forth and bickering, and finally I said to him, I said, "You know how it's going to go. You're going to call Adult Protective Services, and in about 72 hours we'll be in probate court in Oakland County. They're going to file a petition for guardianship. I'll say I have the power of attorney. The court will appoint me guardian or dismiss this. And I'll have 72 hours in order to get a plan together." After going through this with the doctor, he says, "I can't handle this anymore. Let's bring legal in and discharge planning." To make a long story short, they kept my mom under observation for 72 hours. In that interim period, I had the knowledge, which obviously you need guidance and counsel in order to understand this, but I got her admitted to a Straith Hospital, which was a subacute rehab facility, so that she could get her 3 days hospital stay. She was there for therapy for 7 days, and then discharged to a rehab facility for 75 days, got stronger, and went back home. The kicker is, as they're wheeling her out to take her into observation, my mom starts screaming, "My head hurts, my head hurts, my head hurts." The doctor says, "You've never complained about a headache or your head hurting." He says, "Let me take a look." The long story short is my mom had shingles and didn't tell anybody about it for 6 to 8 weeks, and she was debilitated from the shingles. So I've discovered that when parents get into their 90s, they become competent enough to make poor decisions. And having a healthcare power of attorney effective immediately, you can deal with the poor decisions for your family. What to look for in a medical and financial power of attorney. Is it effective immediately, or is it going to be effective when you're unable to participate in your decisions? Is there an alternate listed? Does it address the right to withdraw life support? Does it cover mental health decisions? Does it cover the Privacy Acts? Does it allow unrestricted gifting? Does it allow to amend, revise, or revoke an existing state plan? Does it establish revocable trust? Don't do it yourself or use a form. One size does not fit all. Allow for fax or photocopies and PDFs, digital assets, and make sure it's valid in more than one state. Now, here's a good segue. We're living longer. If I'd known I was going to live so long, I'd taken better care of myself. Mark Twain said that. 12% of 65-year-olds have Alzheimer's disease, and 50% 85-year-olds. 70% of all caregivers over the age of 70 go first. There's more parents to care for children, and more than double the annual spending on the cost of home care and nursing home care combined. The government gives us quid pro quos. It allows us to protect and preserves the assets because there is an enormous cost of care where families take care of families. So families are going to spend about $500 billion of unpaid care where families take care of families. The government knows this. There's 50 million Americans aged 18 or older are providing unpaid care to an adult. And who needs long-term care? Everyone thinks it's a 50-50 chance. In reality, 70% of the people turning age 65 can expect to use some form of long-term care during their lives. And it's not just for the elderly. I've got clients at 39 died of Alzheimer's with 3 young children. I've got probably 35 clients right now with either frontal temporal dementia or Pick's disease or Lewy body or Parkinson's that are under 65. And what is the cost of care these days? The cost of care in a typical nursing home is going to be somewhere between $9,000 and $12,000 a month. Home care is going to be $22 an hour, 365 days a year at about $15,000 a month. Nobody can afford this. So how do we pay for long-term care? We be rich, we be poor, we plan, or we look at long-term care insurance. You're blessed and you spend your money and you have enough assets to pay from income and dividend and not dissipate. You're broke and you go on Medicaid. Or better yet, why don't we plan or buy long-term care insurance, stay-at-home insurance, assisted living, adult daycare, and you don't have to worry about all these things. The problem is it can be expensive. You may not have the health to buy it. So we have to plan carefully. Everyone needs the health care and financial power of attorney with the gifting authority. There's alternatives to nursing home care. There's home-based Medicaid waiver, there's assisted living, there's adult daycare, and adult foster care. These 3 are self-explanatory. The waiver is basically if you're single or married and your personal income is less than $23.49 and your assets are eligible for Medicaid, you may be able to qualify for home-based community care. It's not 24/7 care. Medicare. This is important. Medicare was designed for the acute medical costs. It covers 2% of the long-term care costs. It requires a 3-day hospital stay, and it must be skilled for rehab. Now, years and years ago, it always, and even to today, most people think in order to qualify for rehab, you have to continue to be improving. So what happens is you get a 3-day hospital stay, which is the day of admission, the next day, and not including the day of discharge. And the requirement is once you get into the rehab is that you continue to improve. That's what everybody believes in this world. Well, that's not true anymore. And if you're listening intently and you're taking notes, write this down. It's JIMO and Google it. Or go for the Center for MedicareAdvocacy.com. Because these days, there's no improvement standard necessary. If you hear the words plateau, it's not even appropriate anymore. The bottom line is it's to prevent a slow decline or to meet your functional goals. If you can't improve, doesn't disqualify you for Medicare. Medicare will pay for the full rate for 20 days. In the next 80 days, there's a $170 copay, and hopefully you have supplemental health insurance to cover the copay. The nursing home game, very simple. These are Rosenberg's rules of healthcare. The nursing homes want the healthy and wealthy patient. If there's a lot of money, you got a waiting list about this big, and you got no money, there's a waiting list about this big. Once you get in, you try to discriminate between the Medicaid and private pay patient at the time of admission. And once you get in, you have that private ticket. So if you can pay privately, you can probably get better care. But the fact of the matter is these days, most facilities are now accepting Medicare and Medicaid and are dual certified. The quality of care, when my mom was in her last 8 months of her life, was in a nursing home, and we would give cookies and baked goods and candy to the staff, put a candy dish in her room, and she got the best quality of care that you can possibly think of. And how do we protect the assets? Caring for a loved one should not cost the savings of a lifetime. There are ways to protect and preserve the assets. What if I told each and every one of you listening that I could walk into every nursing home, go room to room and bed to bed, and if a married couple where one spouse is in the community and one spouse is in the nursing home, I could protect 100% of the assets, guaranteed except for income tax consequences. And for single people, we can protect 50 to 70% of the assets. Now this is complicated, and we're going to go through this. And you just have to understand the takeaways today. Everyone needs the health care and financial power of attorney. Caring for a loved one will not cost the savings a lifetime, and there are solutions by working with an elder law attorney who specializes in estate planning and kicks it up several notches. Medicaid was no system for the middle class. It's designed for individuals who have no other means to care. The problem is our government says, go broke and we'll give you a hand. And things change constantly. Pretty simple. If you go into a nursing home, you can keep your home. If it's not in a living trust, the equity has to be under $585,000, $2,000, personal property, 1 car, some irrevocable funeral contracts, special needs trusts, and special annuities. The well spouse, in a married situation, the well spouse can keep half the assets up to about $130,000. So if a married couple has $200,000, the well spouse can keep $100,000, and $100,000 is at risk. If they have $400,000, $130,000 they can keep, and $270,000 at risk. Income, the well spouse can keep all their income. If they're working and making $100,000 a year, they can keep it. If they're not working, they have $1,000 a month in income, and the ill spouse has $2,000 in income, the well spouse can have up to about $3,000 a month in income, so it gets diverted to the well spouse. And income and assets can always be increased by a court order or create a sole benefit trust. So what is a sole benefit trust? It's the best thing since sliced bread, guys. Basically, we used it for about 20 years, and in 2014, the state of Michigan says we don't like it anymore, we won't accept it. As part of the elder law section, we filed a lawsuit against the state of Michigan, and it went all the way through the courts up to the Michigan Supreme Court, and guess what? It got approved. So what does it mean? So let's say, for discussion's sake, I have a dad in the nursing home, mom in the community, and they have $500,000 in assets. $130,000 my mom can keep, and there's $370,000 at risk. So what happens is my mom creates a special trust in her name, in her Social Security number. She's not the trustee. It's irrevocable. I'm the trustee, and I give her back the money over her life expectancy. That trust is a sole benefit trust for the well spouse. The money in that trust that I control for my mom's benefit only, and it has to get paid back to her over her life expectancy, is not a countable asset. It's that simple. I can move the at-risk assets for a married couple into a sole benefit trust and protect it all, and my dad can qualify for Medicaid. Now, when you start moving assets and figuring this out, there may be income tax consequences of IRAs. You may lose, you may have to cash out annuities or liquidate assets. You just don't know. But honestly, I can protect a married couple's assets 100% of the time. And I know it sounds way too good to be true. It's not. Michigan Supreme Court approved this unanimously, and our Supreme Court doesn't do anything unanimously. What other strategies are? Well, let's say we don't want my mom's in a nursing home, and my mom has $1 million IRA. Well, income is basically hers is protected. She could annuitize the annuity, so basically she puts it in a freezer, it gets welded shut, and once a month she gets a check for her income, and that money is converted into a very special annuity, and that's protected. So the Medicaid allows the well spouse as much income as they receive. And then there's something that I'm very, very proud of. I won something in the Court of Appeals. And I won a case in the Court of Appeals defining the ability to go into court and ask the court to increase the amount of assets or income for a married couple. So basically, I had a situation where a woman, Ramona Van Sack, was living in St. Clair County. Her husband was in the nursing home. They'd gone through all their assets in the last 3 years, and then she said, I can't live on this anymore. I'm paying $3,000 a month to the nursing home, my husband's income, and I'm living on $2,000 a month. I basically filed a petition to the court for support under the probate court, and the state of Michigan fought me tooth and nail all the way through the courts. And the courts basically said, you can do this. I'm not going to get into the legal rationale, but the bottom line is, as long as you need the money and it's not for a lavish lifestyle, the courts can divert the income or assets for the benefit of the well spouse, and the federal government and the state of Michigan has to accept that as gospel, and it's protected. So married couples have really some great safe harbors. Now we have to talk about the 5-year look back. When you apply for benefits, Medicaid says they want to know what happened the last 5 years. And if they find out you gave gifts, they basically say to you, had you not given the money away, you could have used that money to pay for your cost of care. And for every $8,600 and change, you'd be disqualified 1 month. It's not a 5-year penalty. An $86,000 gift is a 10-month delay when you apply for benefits. Here's a good example. Grandma, on May 16th, May of 2016, gives $32,000 to the granddaughter for college, son who lost a job, church donation, or daughter to take care of her. One of these. On May of 2018, grandma has a stroke or severe dementia, pays private for care, and it's out of money. So grandma had some health issues in 16. Now in 2018, she's out of money. In 19, she goes into the nursing home. And they say, what did she do in the last 5 years? Well, she gave money away, $32,000. So they're going to say, because you gave money away, you're still ineligible for 4 months. So who's going to pay for the care? The family's going to pay for the care. They're going to try to discharge her. The bottom line is that this 5-year look back applies to families taking care of families and paying people without a care contract, church donations, paying for food and shelter for your son who's lost a job, which could be more important these days than ever, a granddaughter for college, whatever. When you transfer money for less than fair value, it's considered a gift under Medicaid law. To obtain the best quality of care in the least restrictive setting, the least cost, that's our goal. I want the greatest quality of care at the least cost to me and my family in the least restrictive setting. So we either can spend the money for goods, care, and service, called a spend down. We can convert assets into protected assets. We can do the gifting half a loaf, but we have to be very careful under the 5-year look back. We can do court or sole benefit. So this is the summary. Conversion, simple. Take your money that's not protected and turn it into an asset that is protected. Buy a new home, buy goods and services, pay off the mortgage, buy the annuity, establish a special needs trust, enter into a care contract, but it's got to be written and notarized. Not divestment is transfer a gift to any blind or disabled child regardless of their age. So if they're on Social Security disability, not SSI, give them the money and you could qualify immediately. Or let's say I was taking care of my mom in her home for a period of 2 years. I get a letter from a doctor, and the doctor says, had you not taken care of your mom, Don, for 2 years, she would have gone into a nursing home. The home could be transferred to me as a caretaker child. Half a loaf. So this is how assets are protected for a single individual. Okay? Pretend dad is, mom's gone. Dad has $300,000 in assets and $3,000 in income. Dad's got dementia, he needs a nursing home. The home is worth $200,000, there's $300,000 in assets. Dad's income is $3,500 a month. The cost of care is $9,500 a month. So we're short $6,000 every month. Well, you can do the math. Basically, he'll be broke in 50 months if we spend $6,000 a month over $300,000. But with a proper power of attorney or even a court order, we gift $180,000. We give it to me, I put it in a trust, and that gift will be a 21-month penalty. The home is exempt. The remaining $120,000 is still sitting in his account. Okay? You can't qualify for Medicaid with that in the account. So we're going to turn it into income. That's going to pay $6,000 a month for 21 months. We take the $120,000, we put it in a freezer, we weld the freezer shut, which is called an annuity. And the $6,000 a month comes back to my dad with his income, pay for the care. When the freezer's empty, he's eligible for Medicaid in 21 months. He's broke in 50 months. And we saved 60% of the assets. Gifting, you should always remember it works, but you got to do it with the assistance of an elder law attorney. Give money to your son and you're getting divorced and your daughter-in-law is now buying the new BMW. Your daughter feels that she's going to inherit the money anyways, and she spends it. God, it looked like the best stock pick of the century, Dad, and I'm sorry I invested and it's gone. I just wanted to pay for my daughter for my care. Who knew I had to have a care contract? That is considered a gift. You give money to your grandson. It's college financial aid. And all of a sudden, you shift his assets to your grandson, and basically he's not eligible for college financial aid, and you are disqualified for Medicaid. You gave a stock, it would cost you $1, it's worth $10,000, they get a tax bill when they sell the property. And the unthinkable happens. You give money to your child, they pass away, and now the money is in the hands of your in-law. And most of these will result in a penalty for Medicaid. We have a newsletter. You're more than welcome to subscribe to it. It will be in your information in your packet that you've received. Be careful of the subtle gift. Basically, set up a joint bank account with the child, then the parent's name is removed, quitclaim deed, college fund for the child. Most importantly, paying a caregiver without a proper notarized care contract is now considered a divestment. These are all gifts under Medicaid. As you can see, this is a very complicated law, and there's so many traps that the average person cannot do this themselves. And now we have estate recovery. State recovery means if you pass away and you qualified for Medicaid and you receive benefits and your assets go through probate, the state of Michigan will recover the cost of care. So what I said to you earlier, I said that your home inside a trust is not a protected a protected asset. If the house is in your name, it's protected, but it's going to go through probate. So I helped write the law of estate recovery in 2007 with another attorney and a state senator, and we were able to draft the law so that we could drive a truck through it. And a ladybird deed is a way to protect and preserve your house. A ladybird deed is basically where I own the home, I can do whatever I want with it with the rest of my life, and upon my death, I have a beneficiary designation. And that could be my trust or it could be my kids. There's no probate, there's no capital gains, there's no estate recovery, there's no Medicaid gift consequences, there's no uncapping of the property tax. Home still is protected asset under Medicaid. A husband and wife retain the protection of tenancy entirety, which they lose, which means if one of them gets sued and the house is in a trust, they could lose the house. The grantor, which is the creator of the trust, does not share in the problems of the future beneficiaries, and I can name the trust as a beneficiary of a deed. I got to tell you, this is the best thing that you can possibly do. I do not typically never recommend to put a house in a trust. So, long-term care planning. Contact the elder law attorney. All attorneys are not the same. Medicaid laws change constantly. Make sure you have the estate plan done ahead of time, if possible. These documents should have a long-term care language in them. If the nursing home is appropriate, make sure that your loved one is in a private pay Medicaid certified facility, and evaluate long-term care insurance, a hybrid long-term care investment. If you already have a policy, have it reviewed. If you do not have one and can afford it and have the health to buy it, to acquire it, you should consider it and perhaps buy it. Very simple. Buy long-term care, hybrid long-term care insurance. While the benefit is paying for the nursing home care, a lump sum gift is made. Maximum penalty is 60 months. If the Medicaid application is appropriately filed on the 60th month after the 5-year long-term care policy benefits expire, Medicaid takes over. Now, I've talked about Medicaid. A lot of people think that Medicaid means poor, horrible care. It is absolutely not true. You are the policeman of the quality of the care of your family, and frankly, most facilities these days, if it's a nursing home, they do accept Medicare and Medicaid, so they're private pay facilities, and they accept Medicaid. So you don't even have to change rooms, and you don't change quality of care. There are some facilities that are straight Medicaid, and those that you may want to stay away from. You get what you pay for. The business of paying for an improperly designed estate plan will remain long after the sweetness of the low price is forgotten. Now, I'd like to wrap this up with a couple things. I want to do a top 10 list of why anybody that's listening and reviewing this webinar, why they should ever go to an elder law attorney. And then I want to leave you with a thought of what the greatest threat to your future and security is. So now I'm Don Letterman Rosenberg. I'm reading the top 10 list. What are the top 10 reasons that you need to go see an elder law attorney? Well, your loved one, your wife, your husband has just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. You should probably go see an elder law attorney. Parkinson's, some form of arthritis, a disease, have a heart attack, a stroke. I have a good Medicare supplement policy, and I'm sure it will cover me if I need long-term care. Medicare doesn't cover long-term care, only covers acute care. I called the Medicaid office to ask about my rights under Medicaid. I called 3 times. I got 3 different answers. Or you know what? I talked to my neighbor on my right, a neighbor on my left, neighbor across the street. Everyone gave me different answers. Go see an elder law attorney. If I become incapacitated, my children will know what to do. You should run to the elder law attorney on that one. I'll protect my assets by giving them to my children. So I'm going to give all my assets to my children. I'll wait 5 years. Don't you dare. You better run faster to the elder law attorney. My spouse just entered a nursing home. I didn't plan ahead. There's nothing I can do except paying the nursing home bill month after month after month. We know with the sole benefit trust, that's not true anymore. I've been caring for my parents for the last 3 years. Now my dad has taken a turn for the worse. The doctor says he'll have to go to a nursing facility. I want to be able to continue to care for my mom at home. I have an adult child with a disability who lives in a group home. My greatest worry in life is what's going to happen to my child with special needs after I'm gone. Go see an elder law attorney. They specialize in special needs planning. My brother was hurt in a car accident. The other driver was at fault and his insurance limits are $100,000. My brother's going to need care. Go to an elder law attorney. And finally, you want to grow old one day on your own terms. So I know this is complicated. I know I probably went a little too fast, but you get the gist. The bottom line is there's things you can do. You don't have to be, even if you have a diagnosis of incapacity, and everybody that listens to me over age 18 or older needs a health care power of attorney. You don't have to have a dime to get sick. And this world has demonstrated that beyond belief. So I'm going to wrap this up. And what's the greatest threat to your future security? This is a little story about 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. The bottom line is the greatest threat to our future security is our procrastination. If we have been your inspiration, we're offering you a free consultation. The webinar will provide you the instructions, and I can't thank you enough for your time and effort today.
Thank you very much, Don, for the great presentation. I know that was a lot of information, and everyone's situation is very specific and tailored to them. If you do have questions about your specific situation and would like Don's help, he'd be more than happy to sitting down and trying to help with your situation. You will have the opportunity to have that free consultation with Don if you'd like at the end of the webinar. So let's move on to our second presenter. Alexander Dinzer is a certified financial planner and managing director with Horizon Advisers. Alex began his career in 2007 with MetLife before graduating with his bachelor's degree in finance from Western Michigan University. He then continued his studies at Oakland University to achieve his CFP designation. Alex now teaches in that same CFP program that he graduated from, and he also earned the designation of Chartered Financial Consultant with a focus in estate planning. Alex is an accomplished financial planner with a dedicated aspiration to help each person he encounters. He has been mentioned in several national publications, including Our Detroit and Investment News. So with your help, I'd like to introduce our second presenter, Alex Dinzer.
Hi, my name is Alex Dinzer, Managing Director with Horizon Advisers. 13 years ago, I started my practice as a financial advisor. Prior to that, I spent 4 years at Western Michigan, graduating with a degree in finance, and I did also a stint in Balad, Iraq. Going to Iraq really made me grow up fast, and when I got out, I was ready to get a job. So I started interviewing at all the different financial services companies that are around the area, and I decided to go work for Snoopy. Many of you probably know who Snoopy represents. Well, I didn't really know who Snoopy represented at the time. MetLife, though, one of the largest insurance companies in the world. And I went in on my very first day of training, and what do you think they started training me on? Exactly, life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, and I was sitting there in the room thinking, what did I just hire into? Because the last thing in the world that I wanted was to be an insurance salesman. I just spent 4 years busting my butt to be a financial advisor, to have a finance degree. So I decided to really focus on investments, building portfolios, doing financial planning with people, but I refuted the insurance aspect of everything because I didn't want to be looked at as an insurance salesman. And I was 22 years old, and I mean, let's face it, when you're 22, you live forever and you're absolutely untouchable. Well, so I started doing the financial planning with a lot of different people, and what I realized very quickly is that most of the people I was working with, retirees and people that are getting ready to retire, they all had very similar objectives. Number one, they wanted to earn a safe rate of return on their money. Number two, they wanted to pay the least amount of income tax they could. Number three, they wanted to have a good estate plan in place, and they didn't want their assets tied up in probate or anything like that. And the last and most important thing that they would always say to me, they'd look me in the eye, they'd say, Alex, no matter what, don't ever let me run out of money. This is all that I have, this is all that I've saved, and it's your job to make sure that this lasts forever. Now that's a lot of pressure on my shoulders, but I would say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, no problem, this money will last forever. This financial plan that we have in place, we're using very conservative assumptions. You have Social Security, you have a pension, your money's going to last for a very, very long time, and when you're 90 years old, you're going to leave all this money to your kids. This plan is bulletproof. Well, what I didn't realize is that the plans I was building and the plans I was putting in place were not bulletproof, because I was leaving out the most fundamental part of financial planning, which is risk management. And it took something to change my perspective for me to change the way that I plan. And as I get older, I'm a true believer that our perspective really drives our behavior. And when I met my wife, Jessica, my perspective changed. And it changed because I got to meet her wonderful grandparents, Mickey and Pat. Now, Mickey and Pat, they were like a lot of other hard-working Michiganders. They worked for Ford Motor Company for 30 years. At the age of 55, they decided they had enough. So they called up Joe, their advisor at Morgan Stanley at the time, and he said, hey, Joe, we'd like to retire, but just like everybody else, we don't know if we've saved enough money. We don't know if we have enough resources to make it work. Can we come in for a meeting? He said, come on down for a meeting. So they sat down with Joe, and they went over all their objectives with him. They said, Joe, we'd like to earn a safe rate of return on our money. We'd like to pay the least amount of income tax that we can. We'd like our money to go to the right people at the right time. We don't ever want to run out of money, Joe, so please take that into account. And also, we have another caveat. We'd really like to fund our grandkids' education. Do you think that's possible? So Joe plugged some numbers in the computer, came back to him and said, congratulations, you guys worked hard, you saved, you have Social Security, you have a pension, you can absolutely retire. Go home and tell all your kids you're going to retire, and go tell them that you're going to help fund college. They were absolutely elated. The next day, they filed their paperwork with HR. 30 days later, they were retired. Everything was going exactly as planned. They bought a condo in Florida. They had the place in Michigan. They were funding the 529 plans for their grandkids, and everything was going exactly as they thought. Until one night, Pat woke up and found Mickey frantically getting dressed in front of the bed. She said, Mickey, what are you doing? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Come back to sleep. He kept repeating himself, saying, Pat, I have to get ready for school. I'm going to be late. I have to get ready for school. I'm going to be late. She kept saying, what are you talking about? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. Finally, she realized that he wasn't getting what she was saying. She took him to the window and said, honey, look, it's snowing outside. They've canceled school. Please come back to bed. So he went back to bed. They woke up the next morning. Mickey didn't remember a thing. Pat figured he was sleepwalking, and they laughed it off. Well, this went on to happen again and again, even having to call over their son in the middle of the night to calm him down because he had no idea where he was. He was disoriented, and finally they got him to go back to sleep. This is when they realized that something was not right. So they called up Dr. Long, and he was a memory care specialist, and he went in for a series of different tests. A week later, they got the most shocking phone call of their lives. At the age of 57, Mickey was diagnosed with dementia. The family was shocked. Mickey and Pat were shocked. But nobody had any idea that this was only the start of a 13-year long-term care journey. Now, Pat is one of the most loving and committed spouses that I've ever met in my life. And she vowed to take care of Mickey for as long as she possibly could. And she did just that. For over 7 years, she gave her blood, her sweat, and her tears. But it got to the point where she would leave and she would come home and he'd be nowhere to be found. And she'd have to drive around the neighborhood to find him wandering around. And when she tried to get him back in the house, he'd be combative and he'd be turning into the complete opposite person that he ever was. This is when she realized that it was no longer safe for him or for her, and that she was forced to start exploring different options. So they started taking visits to the different facilities, and they ended up settling on the Villages of Dearborn, which is a facility that has independent living, assisted living, and a memory care unit. They sat down with the coordinator and they determined that the most affordable way that they can move forward would be for them to move into independent living, where Pat and Mickey would be able to live together, but they'd be able to have the staff that's available there if she needed them at any point during the day or night. The cost to do this would be for them to sell their home, make a $250,000 down payment, and start paying $6,000 a month. But this was their only option. So they sold their home, they moved in, and they started paying the $6,000 a month. Well, as you can imagine, his condition continued to get worse. And he was forced to move to the assisted living wing with memory care. And the cost went from $6,000 to $9,000 a month. And eventually, when he forgot how to walk and talk, he was moved to the full-time 24-hour memory care unit, where the cost was over $12,000 a month. Eventually, at the age of 70, he passed away and he went on to a much better place. The total cost of their long-term care journey was over $590,000. All of their hard work, the savings, the discipline they had to put the money away was all wiped out. I start with this story because, number one, it's real, and number two, it gave me the perspective that I needed to realize that we're not invincible, that we don't know what tomorrow brings, and that we have to do good planning and take these different risks into account. And so I'm going to go through, over the next 20 minutes, some different ways that you can protect yourself that you've probably never heard of. And I'm going to go through things quickly, and so if there's any questions afterwards, please reach out to us for more information. A little bit about our firm. We are a young firm with a lot of experience. So currently we have 11 financial advisors, we have 4 CPAs, and a tax preparer. And we have office locations in Troy, Farmington, Southfield, Plymouth, and Flint. We're an independent financial planning office and associated with Voya Financial. Where we see that we're different than a lot of other financial planning firms is we work in coordination very, very well with other professionals. And so we have the tax side, but if our CPAs are not a good fit for our clients or they already have a relationship, we work very well with our clients' CPAs. And our attorneys, our estate planning attorneys that we work with are some of the best around. And what we've found is that when all the professionals are talking together, the people's plan is much more coordinated and they have a much more successful result. And that, I feel, is what we do much differently than a lot of other professionals. So step number one in long-term care planning is to have a plan. So if you're watching this right now, you can ask yourself, do you have a plan? Normally when we do these presentations live, in person, what we find is that normally about 2 people in the room, or 10% of people, actually have some type of long-term care plan in place. Step number 2 is to communicate that plan once you've developed it with your friends, your family, or the person that's going to be in charge. That's not only just your long-term care plan, but that's also your estate plan. I can't tell you how many times I sit down with one of my clients who's in their 50s and I say, hey, have you talked to your mom and dad about their planning and making sure that everything's set up right? And I'll get the response, my dad, he's so old school, he will not tell me a thing. And I just say, listen, it's going to be your problem one day, so you need to take charge now. You need to deal with it. It just takes one issue, one thing not titled properly, for everything to not be right and to have to go through probate, which is not something that you want to do. So step number 3 is determine how will you pay for long-term care if one of these things is to happen. You know, a lot of people have pensions because we live in Michigan and we have a lot of different companies that offer pensions, but those things don't really exist anymore. So people have Social Security, people have savings. Some people have saved enough, but for the majority of people in the middle, they're the ones that are going to be affected the most. Those people that have saved nothing, the people that were not disciplined and never really saved a dollar, they're taken care of. And the government's going to cover their cost of care. But everyone else, the people that saved, that worked hard, that were disciplined, are going to have to spend down almost all of their money before they're going to get any type of assistance. And so ask yourself where you fall in that category. Strategies to fund long-term care is you could save a lot of money and self-insure the cost. We normally see that you would have to have a couple million, $3 million, but then again, it all depends on your lifestyle. So if you're spending a lot of that money, then that's not a good strategy at all. You can care for your loved ones with your time and your health, and I'm going to cover that in the next slide. You can rely on your children to provide care. Most people's kids are all over the country, and they're very busy with their own lives, and most parents don't want to burden their families. You can spend down all of your assets and rely on Medicaid, which is not the best strategy at all. Or you could use advanced legal planning techniques, which we use often with our attorneys to shelter assets. But that all has to be done ahead of time. And the other thing about that is that when you're sheltering assets and putting that money away, those assets and that type of care is only going to be provided in a nursing home. So Medicaid planning, it has to be taken into consideration. It's not going to pay for in-home care unless you can qualify for a Medicaid waiver, which is very difficult. And the last one is you can transfer that risk to an insurance company. And those are really all of your options. Alarming statistics, and this is why you don't want to care for your loved ones with your time or your health, is that 40 to 70% of caregivers are clinically diagnosed as depressed, with more than half of those having major depression. 23% of caregivers that have been caring for a caregiver for over 5 years report their health as fair to poor. And the last and most alarming statistic is that 70% of caregivers over the age of 70 die first while caring for a loved one. And I watched this personally with my grandparents. My grandfather, we owned a florist shop growing up in Novi. And my grandfather and his 4 brothers owned it before my father and his 4 brothers. And every single day, my grandfather would come into the greenhouse and he'd walk around and he'd water flowers, he'd get his exercise, he'd get out of the house. And when my grandmother got sick, he stopped doing everything. He stayed home every single day and cared for her. And his health deteriorated just as fast as hers did. And he was perfectly healthy before that. And so if anyone has seen this, you know that that is true. The family legacy is a lot of things that people don't always think about because we're always living in the moment. But the family legacy is something that is important that we find to most people. Because most people, I think, would rather see their money go to family or friends or a charity than be all spent on a nursing home or medical bills or things like that. And so we always ask our clients to think about taxes. How will that reduce your legacy? You know, we're doing a lot of planning right now around taxes because we are in, historically, some of the lowest rates that we've ever seen in our lives. And so things like Roth conversions, things like planning for the money to pass down more efficiently, and then with the passing of the new rules around how children inherit IRAs, all of that has changed. So as of December 31st of 2019, if you pass away anytime after that, when a non-spouse beneficiary inherits an IRA, it's no longer the ability to stretch out that IRA over that person's lifetime. The new rules state that by the end of the 10th year, that IRA must be liquidated. There's no rule or law that's in place that they have to take a distribution out every single year, or that it has to come out over 5 years. So really that person could wait until the 10th year to liquidate that money, or they could liquidate it all in the first year. What do you think 99% of kids do when they inherit mom and dad's IRA? Well, of course, they liquidate it in the first year because they need the money, right? They want to buy a boat, they want to buy a cottage, they need the money for college because they didn't save enough. And so if you can make it so it's more tax efficient for your kids in the future, think about doing that today. Will your inheritance be liquid or illiquid? Meaning, you're going to leave real estate, you're going to leave stocks or bonds, you're going to leave gold bars. I mean, all of that stuff needs to be planned out. And when you don't have a plan, it's just whatever is left, and normally it's a mess, and you probably could have done better if you had a plan in place. So what we focus on doing with our clients is to help them identify what we call the never money. And the never money is really a bucket of money that you probably will not need based on your lifestyle and what you're spending, unless you needed care or unless you gave that money away ahead of time before you passed away. And so helping people identify their different buckets can help you have a lot more efficient plan as well. So this is one of my favorite slides, and this basically sums up my entire presentation. But what are the risks? I mean, every single person out there that drives a car insures it, at least most people do and should at least. And most people also who own a home have homeowners insurance. But the fact is that most people have been paying on their homeowners insurance their entire lives and really never have made a claim probably substantial enough to get back all of their premiums, but we still pay those premiums every single year, every single month. Now, do we have to have homeowners insurance if our house is paid off? No, of course not. Do we have to have full coverage on our vehicle if our vehicle is paid off? No, we can have PLPD. Ask yourself, is your car worth more than your life savings? Is it worth more than every single thing that you've worked hard for your whole life? To put away, to be disciplined, to save the money, to go without? Is it worth more? But you would probably insure your $20,000 vehicle for full coverage, but you don't insure your retirement. Think about that in perspective. There's a 1 in 80 chance of using your homeowner's insurance. There's a 1 in 40 chance of using your automobile insurance. And 1.47 in 2 people over the age of 65 will need some type of long-term care assistance during their lifetime. For some people, it might be 2 months. And for others, it could be 2 years. And for others, it could be 5 and 10 years. The question is how long will it be for you? And the answer to that is nobody knows. And so when you think about what you have, doesn't it make sense to protect what you have in the most efficient and effective way that you possibly can? We're going to show you how. We're going to talk about traditional long-term care versus hybrid long-term care solutions, which are the 2 different solutions that are available today. And the hybrid solutions, they're not even really new anymore. We've been talking about this stuff for 10 years, but people are not talking about this at all. And we're going to fill you in on what they're about today. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that with traditional long-term care, that's going to be like your homeowner's insurance. Technically, it's an expense of yours, right? Because if you don't ever use it, there's nothing really you get out of it. Same thing with your homeowners. You can pay your premium for that year, and if you don't make a claim, you don't get that money back. And for hybrid solutions, these are going to be more like investments, where the money you put into it, you will get back something, whether it's what you put into it or maybe even more. And so defining what an expense and what an investment is important when you're thinking about how we use our monies. So traditional long-term care is like your homeowner's insurance, like I said, which everybody insures their home. And it's a very similar comparison is You're not going to drive home and hope to make a claim on your homeowner's insurance hoping your house is on fire, right? You're not. But having that coverage gives you peace of mind, helps you sleep at night. With long-term care insurance in general, whether it's a hybrid or a traditional policy, the way that you qualify to start receiving payment from those policies is if you're unable to perform 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. Now, these activities of daily living are eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, incontinence. Dementia can also be an automatic qualification. So if you think about these activities, they're pretty much what you do on a daily basis. You wake up, you go to the bathroom, you walk to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom, you get dressed, you eat, you bathe, all those different things. If you can't do that without substantial assistance, your policy is going to pay out and start helping you cover expenses. With traditional long-term care, there are a lot of strengths to these policies. It's pure insurance, so it's like term insurance. It's the cheapest form, and it'll also give you the most amount of coverage, but for one reason or another, people just don't like it. It's going to provide you a large pool of dollars that you can use tax-free for in-home care, assisted living, or a nursing home. So essentially, you're going to be paying a premium. Maybe it's $100 a month, maybe it's $200 a month. It's as much money as you want to pay for as much coverage as you want to have. And so if you pay maybe $200 a month and you have a $200,000 pool of money that you can use tax-free to pay for in-home care, assisted living, or a nursing home, you can do that by not being able to qualify for 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. The weakness of these policies and why most people today don't buy them is, number one, because they listen to advice from their neighbor who has no idea about insurance, and they listen to the advice of their aunt or uncle or whomever, right? I mean, except for the professionals. But the other weakness is that the insurance company can raise the premiums on a traditional long-term care policy if they're experiencing large amounts of claims. Now, do you think that the premiums have gone up on people? Everyone should be shaking their head because they have. And they've gone up a lot. And there are companies like General Electric, which owns a company called Genworth, which is a large insurance company, who was one of the biggest suppliers of long-term care insurance companies in the marketplace, almost was on the verge of bankruptcy because of their long-term care division. They were suffering billions of dollars of claims that had unlimited benefit periods from policies. And as a result, number one, the company almost went bankrupt, but number two, they raised the premiums on people's policies multiple times. And it's not just Genworth, it's almost all long-term care companies out there had to do that because the policies were priced not correctly. You know, long-term care is a newer form of insurance. Life insurance has been around for hundreds of years. Long-term care has been around for maybe 50 years. And so they didn't have the studies, and let's face it, we're living a lot longer than we did 50 years ago, right? I mean, 50 years ago, the average life expectancy was probably 68 years old. And now, if you're over the age of 65, you have a 50% chance of living to age 90 if you're a female and age 84 if you're a male. Sorry guys, we don't live as long. So these policies can raise your premiums. The other thing is if you don't lose it, you lose it. And there's a lack of competition among carriers. So you can pay your premiums every single year, and if you wake up one day and you're an angel, well, there's no refund. But that's insurance for the most part, right? Hybrid policies are where most of our clients and people that come to us see the most value. And whether it's just because the fact that they're going to get something out of it no matter what, that they buy it, or because they want the protection, I mean, I don't know, but I think it's more the investment aspect personally. So what these are, in this example, is a life insurance policy that has a long-term care rider attached to it. And what that says is that if you get sick, you can now draw down that death benefit that was, when you took it out, for somebody else, right? Because life insurance is always for your spouse, your kids, your family, somebody else. But now you can use that death benefit for yourself to pay for in-home care, assisted living, or a nursing home. So that solves, number one issue, which is if you pay your premiums and you get nothing out of it. So now if you pay your premiums, you don't need long-term care, a tax-free death benefit pays out. The second thing is there's a lot of different insurance companies offering products. So competition helps drive down cost and increase efficiency. That's in any business. So that's the thing. There's underwriting flexibility, and you also have the aspect of guaranteed premiums. So most of the products out here have guaranteed premiums where you know what you're going to pay from the very beginning, and the insurance company cannot raise the cost on you. Most people in retirement like to know that they cannot raise the cost because they're on a fixed income. So that's another great aspect of the hybrid policy. The weaknesses is you can't wait until you've had 3 heart attacks and a stroke to go get the policy. That's the rule of adverse selection, where people that are unhealthy are the people that want to get insurance, and then that's why there's underwriting to get those people out of the pool so that costs can remain constant. So weaknesses is you need to be somewhat healthy, and there's less customization options than maybe on the traditional side. However, with medical technology, we're able to insure people today that have a multitude of issues. So if you have diabetes, you're insurable at a pretty decent rate as long as it's controlled. If you've had a heart attack, you might be insurable if it's been enough time. If you've had cancer, the same thing. So all these different aspects of medical technology have allowed people to still qualify for insurance later, which I think is important. I'm going to go through a few case studies very quickly so you can understand exactly how these things work. So Mr. and Mrs. Jones attended a workshop of ours not too long ago, a couple years ago. Mr. Jones was 69 and Mrs. Jones was 66. They had good assets. They were really good savers. So they had saved a lot of money in IRAs. They had saved $750,000 in IRAs. And they also had an after-tax, like a bank account with $100,000 in it. They had 3 children, and their goals were to leave their kids as much money as they possibly could. They loved their family. But they were concerned about a couple things also. Number one, they were concerned about the fact that the boys would have to pay taxes on every single dollar inside that IRA. And they wanted to make that more tax efficient for them. Concern number 2 was that all of Mr. and Mrs. Jones' money in that IRA was invested in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and he remembers what the balance was in 2008. And the balance got down to $375,000 because he lost 50%. Can we pick and choose the year that we're going to pass away? Absolutely not. And so he was concerned that he'd maybe pass away in the wrong year, that the markets would be down and the kids would inherit a lot less money. And then his third concern was that he was completely unprotected if something did happen. He watched his parents have a long-term care event and was very worried about it. And he also had another issue that wasn't really an issue, but he was approaching the age of 70 and a half. Now the RMD rules have changed, and so now if you had not turned 70 and a half prior to January 1st of 2020, you're under the new rules, which Sal says that you don't have to take out a required minimum distribution until you're 72. So he was going to be forced to pull out $26,500 a year from his IRA, of which he did not need that money. And so before he met us, his plan was to take that money from his IRA and just reinvest it back into a brokerage account outside of the IRA. So he's going to take it out, pay taxes, then reinvest it. But that didn't really help the fact that his money was still all in the market. And so we coached him and said, hey, what if you did something a little bit different and you took that money that you don't really need and you bought yourself some protection through a hybrid life insurance long-term care policy. So what we did is we recommended for Mr. and Mrs. Jones 2 different policies. On Mr. Jones, a $300,000 policy with a long-term care rider that would allow him to pull out $72,000 per year tax-free for in-home care, assisted living, or a nursing home. If he used up every dollar in that policy, the policy would pay out for 4.2 years. That's just doing 72,000 times 4.2 equals 300,000. So every time he pulls out the money, it reduces the death benefit dollar for dollar. For Mrs. Jones, he recommended a $400,000 policy on Mrs. Jones. Why did we do this? Because females live longer, and Mrs. Jones had good longevity in her family. So given that her death benefit was going to be $400,000, she'd be eligible to draw out up to $96,000 per year. She could take out less money every year, which would then make the policy last longer. But if you did the math and she took out the maximum amount every single year, it would last for 4.2 years as well. So the premiums combined for these two policies were $17,280 per year. And they were going to be able to cover themselves for $700,000 of protection and or a legacy if they did not use the money. And I always ask people when we're in a live presentation, is this $17,000 an expense or an investment? And normally half the room gets it right and half the room gets it wrong. But I'm going to tell you that this $17,000 is an investment, because if you don't use the money for long-term care, the death benefit still pays out tax-free. And so that is why it's an investment, because an investment should be something that you put money into, and hopefully you get back at least what you invested and more, right? I think everyone would agree with that. So for all those people that wanted to do the math, for all the engineers out there, we did the math for you. So assuming that Mr. Jones took out the policy and he's paying $8,300 a year for a $300,000 benefit, and let's just say that Mr. Jones lived a long and healthy life and he lived until he was 87 years old, he would have put in $150,000 into this policy. If he woke up and was an angel, the insurance company would be obligated to write a check for $300,000 tax-free to Mrs. Jones or the next beneficiary in line. Now, the rate of return that he would have to receive if he said, Alex, you're crazy. I'm not going to buy insurance. I'm 70 years old. That's stupid. He would have to earn 8.57% every single year on that $8,300 investment. So meaning if he took $8,300 in 2020 and bought as many shares of Apple stock as he could, and then the following year he bought another $8,300 worth, and then another $8,300 worth, over that period of 18 years, the average rate of return would have to be 8.57. That's not bad, I would say. And everyone may have a different opinion on that. For Mrs. Jones, we did the same math. Remember, she was younger at the time she bought it. And if she lived till 87, she would have put $213,000 in to get out $400 with an internal rate of return of 9.68%. And that's the tax equivalent yield. So what we call this is production on our money. And number one, we don't buy insurance to be an investment, but it can and it could be an investment if you qualify for a good enough rating and if you don't put in more money than you get out. That's just basic, simple math. But there's no way that I know of, and if you know a different way, please call me immediately, to turn $8,300 into a specific amount of money overnight. And so to illustrate this, if you did not take the recommendation that would have given Mr. and Mrs. Jones, you took $8,300 and you bought Apple stock, what would it be worth in 2020? Well, who knows? It's probably worth less right now, given the markets. But the point is that it's uncertain. And you don't ever want to create a risk management plan with any uncertainty at all. You want it to be certain. You want it to be 100% certain. If you put $8,300 and you bought a policy, how much is it worth the very next day? It's worth $300,000. So if you needed care and you had a stroke, you have that pool of money available to you day one. And if you passed away, unfortunately, you have $300,000 that's going to go to the beneficiaries the next day. That's how powerful this type of coverage is. And that's why you buy insurance. That's why you do any type of planning, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's why you don't wait to do estate planning. You don't wait to buy insurance. You do it right now, and that's how you be prepared. With Mr. Smith, he was 78 years old. He came to us. He had an old insurance policy that he was paying $2,700 a year into, and he had a lot of cash value in $123,000 and a death benefit of $150,000. So in 2001, they changed the insurance tables, and they changed them for the better. Insurance is a lot less expensive than it was prior to that. And the reason being is because insurance is based on mortality. And before then, like we had already mentioned, people didn't live as long. So now, with people living longer, the actual cost of insurance is less. And so he had a policy he had bought a long time ago, back in the 80s, when things were a lot more expensive. And as a result, had a bunch of cash value in there, which he never intended to use. He intended to leave this money to his wife and his kids one day. So what we recommended for him, and he was not the healthiest guy at all, is we transferred that $123,000 over to a new policy which bought him a $251,000 death benefit with long-term care for the exact same premium. Yes, the cash value is not going to really be there for his use, or it would be, but it's at a reduced amount, but he didn't need it and he wasn't planning on using it anyways. Unfortunately, we did lose Mr. Smith a couple years ago. And so he only had this policy for about 4 years, and he passed away, and his wife used that extra money to give it all to her grandkids. So she took the extra $100,000 that this new policy gave her, and she gifted it to her kids. And that was one of the most meaningful things that she could have ever done. The last couple that we've worked with is Mr. and Mrs. Fox. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Fox, they were single. They weren't single, I'm sorry. They were married, but they had no children, and they wanted the last check they wrote to bounce the day before they died, right? They didn't have anyone to leave to anybody. And they were good savers. They were young, though. They had just retired, 62, vibrant, full of energy. And they had $150,000 in the bank. They had $75,000 in an IRA and $100,000 in a brokerage account. So the $150,000 in the bank, I said, how much is that paying you? They said, not much, about 1%, maybe 0.5. And I said, well, actually, it's paying you -3 because you have to factor in inflation. They said, oh, I guess you're right, yeah. They also had, they had Social Security, and they had a pension, and they were living just off of their income, right? So they had the Social Security and the pensions coming in, and they were living just off that. And I said, well, what happens if one of you guys needs care? And they said, oh, well, we got the money in the bank, we got the brokerage account, we got the, we'll pay for it with that. And I looked at Mrs. Fox and I said, Mrs. Fox, what if Mr. Fox needs care first and he uses all the money up? What are you going to do? She goes, I didn't really think about that, Alex. That's a really good question. So what I said is, how about we look at something like this? We looked at repositioning some of the money that was in the bank earning nothing into a fixed annuity that has a long-term care rider. Now, we're not really big fans of annuities in our office, and we only use them in the right circumstances because a lot of people are just selling annuities out there because they pay high commissions. We're only using them if they serve the right purpose. And so for this situation, it made sense. What this annuity would do is they'd put the $100,000 in. It would pay them a nominal interest rate, which is anywhere between 1% and 2% a year, nothing really extravagant. But what it did is it tripled the deposit and created another bucket of money that would allow either one of them to draw on it or either one of them to draw at the same time to pay for long-term care services. And that's in-home care, assisted living, or a nursing home. So now they turned $100,000 into $300,000 overnight, and they still retain their asset. So if they get down the road and they want to cash out the money, they can cash it out and go to the casino or go spend it or go on a vacation. They can do whatever they want with it. Now, if they cash it out within the surrender period, they have to pay a penalty, but we explained that and they understood it. The biggest benefit of it, and again, is that there's no way to turn $100,000 into $300,000 overnight. the reason why you buy insurance is to protect you from tomorrow. And also, the $100,000 that was in the bank was paying them nothing. And it would take the rest of my life and the rest of their lives for it to ever reach 300, and it still wouldn't reach 300,000 in the banks. The banks aren't paying us anything. So they were really happy with that suggestion and solution, and that's what we decided to implement for them. Now, if they get to the end of their days and they wake up and they're both angels, whatever's in the account value, the original deposit plus the interest, goes to the named beneficiary. So they never lost control of it. They never spent it, but that money would go to the beneficiary. And one of the guarantees is that the account value would never be invaded by cost or anything like that associated with the long-term care rider. So our process for meetings is our first meeting, we really focus on working with people in a financial planning capacity. And so we're not going to just be recommending products to anybody. There's no specific product that we represent. We are independent. We work with 100 different insurance companies. I mean, whoever has the best featured available solution for that client is the one that we're going to choose. So our first meeting is going to be very much informational gathering and really trying to understand your financial situation so that we can make a good recommendation in a second meeting. So the first meeting is gathering information, asking you a lot of questions that probably you've never heard. And the second meeting would be actually presenting you a financial plan, recommendations, and how the specific recommendations actually fit into your plan. And then there's not going to be a high pressure sales pitch or anything like that. It's if you want to make a decision to move forward, it's completely up to you. And the third meeting, we'll decide if you want to schedule it. If you want to schedule it, we'll be answering any questions and then deciding if you want to do anything that we recommended. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward. But we pride ourselves on doing a thorough job and always presenting something with an unbiased opinion. Without a plan, and I've seen this over and over throughout the years, it will create more confusion, frustration, guilt, fear, anxiety, added time and expense, and disagreement among siblings or peers. I want to go back to where I started, and I started with a personal story that helped me gain perspective. I used to talk to Pat all the time about her situation and what she went through. And she used to always tell me, Alex, we thought we were doing everything right. We hired a financial advisor from a credible firm. We worked with him. We thought we were getting financial planning. And we also, thought that we were completely safe and that we were on track. And it was never brought up to us to even consider long-term care protection. And as a result, we went through everything. And I'm telling you, we see it every single day. And I also teach at Oakland University. I've been teaching in their program since 2014. And I teach their risk management process, believe it or not, their class in their CFP program. And when we get to the topic on long-term care, I can see every advisor in the room, because they're all advisors that are in the business with experience, but I can see them light up because they're excited to learn about it because they know how important it is. They've seen their clients go through it, and they want to understand it, and they want to know how it all works, and they're not getting the teaching at their current places. And so, I'm telling you, if you work with somebody, that's great. We're not trying to steal you away or a relationship. We'd like to complement that with something that people don't really understand. So please give us a shot. We'd love to help you, and we'd love to help you live a more secure and prosperous retirement. Thank you very much, and thank you for attending.
Thank you for attending our educational webinar on how to protect assets from long-term care expenses. Like both of our speakers had mentioned, it truly is one of the biggest risks to your retirement that is not always accounted for. It would be an honor to have the opportunity to serve you and your family. If you would like to discuss your specific situation, we would love to schedule a 15-minute introduction call to introduce ourselves to each other and see if we can help in any way. We can also address any more specific questions you had that were not answered in the Q&A or during the presentation. We would love to help anyone who is looking for it. So again, Thank you for attending, and we wish you continued health and success going into the future. Have a great day. So Don, there were a few questions that came in during your presentation. Question 1, if there is one message that you could tell the people, what would it be?
Well, people think that if a loved one becomes ill, all hope is lost. They just think they're going to have to spend all their money until it's gone, and then somehow they'll get some assistance. If it's one message I can tell anybody, is farthest from the truth that you have to spend everything that you've worked your life for. There is ways to plan proactively and reactively. So there's 3 types of planning in this world. There's estate planning, which everybody needs to do. And as we get older, and when I do estate planning, I always do proactive planning. So I don't do estate planning. Every plan I do deals with what if I get sick, how can I pay for it without going broke. And so we do proactive planning, and the bottom line is that there are ways, there's such a misconception of what people think and what the reality is. And everybody I know says, this sounds too good to be true. I've talked to my neighbor and they had to spend everything down. So the one message is that you need to go to a specialist. If you have a heart problem, you don't go to a podiatrist. You go to a cardiologist. If you have health issues in your family, or you want to plan for the future, you can go to an attorney that does wills and trusts and power of attorneys, but when you get sick or you have a health issue, no matter what age or car accident, it's not going to protect you. You really need to see an elder law attorney to address those particular needs.
Understood. Thank you, Don. Question number 2. What is the most important specific document that you can advise a client to establish when putting their house in order?
It's a very simple answer. There are 2 types of planning. There's life planning and there's planning what happens to the assets after you're gone. The most impact on anybody during our lifetime is a illness or inability to manage their financial affairs. It's the durable power of attorneys. There's a durable power of attorney for health care that deals with care, custody, treatment, end-of-life, day-to-day, and mental health decisions. And everybody over the age 18 should have one. You have, if your children are home or they're in college and they get sick, you don't have any legal authority whatsoever to make their decisions without a court order called a guardianship or the durable power of attorney for health care. Husband and wives don't have the ability to make each other's medical decisions without a piece of paper from the court or a health care power of attorney. So to me, that's the most important thing, because you don't have to have a dime to get sick. And then if you have assets, you need the financial power of attorney. You don't want to put your house in the trust. You can't put IRAs in a trust. The bottom line is if you get sick and someone needs to manage your IRA or your home or to protect the assets from the nursing home, the health care and financial power of attorneys are your cornerstone and your foundation and your building blocks to make sure that you get the greatest quality of care, the least cost to you and your family, and the least restrictive setting. And so, without a doubt, anybody over age 18 needs a health care power of attorney.
Understood. Thanks, Don. Finally, last question. Simply put, should I put my home in a trust?
No, simply put. Why? The law says if you put your house in a trust, it's no longer protected if you get sick and need governmental assistance. Okay? If you put the house in the trust and you pass away, it's not a protected asset. If you take it out of the trust and put it in your name, and you get passed away after receiving governmental assistance, the state of Michigan recovers the cost of care. That's one reason not to put it in a trust. If you're a married couple, you put it in a trust, and one gets in a car accident, you lose what's called tenancy by entirety protection. That means a husband and wife is super protected from their individual creditors. You put that asset into the trust, you lose that. Additionally, there's a new Court of Appeals case in Michigan that basically says if you put the house in the trust and don't name your homeowner's insurance as additional insured, it's not covered. So I never put the house in the trust unless there's a real specific reason to do so. What I do is a Lady Bird deed. So a Lady Bird deed basically says I own the home, I can do whatever I want with it, and upon my death, it goes back into my trust. There's no probate, there's no capital gains, there's no estate recovery, and there's no Medicaid consequences. And it's a simple document to do. You file it with the Register of Deeds, and you file a property transfer affidavit with your city's assessor's office. So honestly, I never put the house in the trust.
Understood. Thank you very much, Don, for the great presentation and the answers to the questions. Thank you, audience, for the great questions. I hope we were able to provide some good answers for you. Thanks.
Thank you.
So Alex, we had some questions come in from the audience.
Okay.
The first one is, if I wanted to get a long-term care hybrid policy and stay at home for care, what are the qualifications the person caring for me has to have in order for the policy to pay out? I have heard of times where these policies won't pay out in specific circumstances, like when a family member is helping.
That's a great question, and it really depends on what kind of policy that you purchase. So normally the qualifications are that the person has to be a licensed professional, maybe a care agency that you hire, but then there also are policies that will pay out to you directly, and then you can direct those payments to whomever you'd like. So there really is a lot of different options out there.
Great. Second question is, what is the process to get approved for one of these insurance policies?
So in that circumstance, and that's another good question, there is either full underwriting, what we call, where somebody has to actually take a physical exam. The insurance company is going to look at medical records of that individual and then make a determination on a rating, which the healthier you are, the cheaper the policy. And then the other way, for people that maybe have health concerns or health issues, prior histories, there are shorter underwriting types of products out there that can maybe just be like a telephone interview, and you can get approval for people that have pre-existing conditions a lot easier with. So again, depends, and each one of those things has their positives and negatives.
Thank you. Question number 3. I already have a life insurance policy that does not have a long-term care rider on it. Is there a way to move to one that does?
So I'm just going to say, first of all, anytime you're going to replace your current life insurance policy, you always want to make sure that you're having a professional do a thorough evaluation, and someone's not just trying to sell you something because your current policy may be very, very healthy, and the new policy you buy might not be as good. So you want to make sure you do a good evaluation. But the answer to the question is yes, you can. So some policies have cash value that they've built up, and you can do what's called a 1035 exchange, which allows you to, kind of like doing a rollover of an IRA to an IRA or 401k to an IRA, you can move that cash value without any type of tax consequences. But again, evaluating the current policy is very important.
How does the payment from the policy get paid out? Do I keep the money and spend it myself?
So again, a lot of that depends on the type of policy you purchase. There are reimbursement and then there are indemnity policies. The reimbursement policies are the ones that are going to pay just for the amount of care that you actually incur. So if you have costs that equal $5,000 a month, they're going to reimburse you for the $5,000 in cost, and then you can pay that to the qualified care facility or caretaker. Then the indemnity policies will actually deposit the money directly into your account, and you can pay whomever you'd like. So that'd be a friend, a family, a neighbor. And again, both of those have their different positives and negatives.
Understood. So there's definitely a lot of options out there. Thank you, Alex, for the great presentation and the answers.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the audience for the questions. We hope we provided you with some good answers. Thanks.
Thanks.